Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new Livebytes webinar. Today, I'm joined with a senior developer advocate, Ado Kukic. He is working for MongoDB, so I'll just add him to the stream, and he can talk a little bit about himself. So, welcome, Ado. Hi.
Awesome. Hey, Amir, how's it going?
Good. How are you? So, how could you tell a little bit about yourself, just a little bit about your background, what you do right now, and then we can go into the webinar.
Yeah, for sure. So currently I work as a senior developer advocate at MongoDB. And my job is to help developers be successful on the MongoDB platform. So, I do a lot of educational stuff, writing blog posts, doing webinars like this, doing live events, talks, and stuff like that to get developers engaged, to help them solve issues they're having with MongoDB, and just kind of improve their developer experience.
Okay, very
And
cool.
I've been a full stack developer for almost 15 years. And, I love coding. I love interacting with people. I love educating people. So it's kind of like a dream job.
Yeah, I can imagine. So let's get into the webinar. I think you're going to talk all about Next.js and MongoDB. So let's get into it. I'll just add your screen so people could see that.
Cool.
All right, and I'll just leave you to it. So I'll just remove myself from the stream, and you can go ahead and talk all about Next.js.
Awesome. Yeah. Let's do it. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Next.js, but it is a modern framework for really building applications with React in a very modern and very powerful way. Now, Next.js, the thing that I really like about Next.js is that it gives you an entire framework to build an application rather than giving you bits and pieces, which React does really well. Next.js takes care of almost everything for you so that you can just focus on building that application you've always dreamed of, instead of figuring out which libraries to include, trying to kind of get stuck in that analysis paralysis that we developers often do. And so in today's webinar, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building an application with Next.js. And so I'm going to try to go through it and show various parts of the Next.js framework, how to use them, how everything kind of ties together. And then we'll also integrate MongoDB into it. So Next.js, by itself, has many different ways you can get your data. You can get it from an API, you can get it from a database, from a markdown file. You're really not limited from like a headless CMS. They have a lot of examples on that, and that's something I've been exploring recently. But you have so many different options when it comes to working with Next.js. And for this webinar, since I know MongoDB really well, I think it would be kind of cool to show how MongoDB works. And the app that we're going to be building is actually an app that I had built a couple of weeks ago for the MongoDB.live conference. So I ran a workshop there, and we kind of went through the entire MongoDB Atlas platform and showed how you can basically use the full power of MongoDB and all of its complementary services to build an entire application from scratch. And I can kind of show you what the app looks like here. Let me find it. Actually, I have it pulled up here. Let me know if you can see this or if you want me to zoom in a little bit. But the app is essentially called Mongo GIF Battle. And what it allows you to do is we pull in a bunch of different GIFs from the Giphy API. And then you, as the user, are able to caption and vote on the GIFs. So here on the dashboard, we have all of our GIFs and the leading caption. So if you click on any of the GIFs, any of the individual GIFs, you can see its current caption and then upvote it or downvote it. So here I've added a couple votes to this particular caption. And then you can also add your own captions. So here we can say, beep, beep, for example. I will hit enter, and now that new caption is added. And if we were to upvote this caption to be the top one, so now we have 9 votes for it, it gets updated on the GIF. And then if we go back to the home page, we can also see that that also updated. We also have Atlas search built in. So if we wanted to search for a particular GIF, we can very easily do so. And this is all built natively with MongoDB. We're not using any external services. So if we wanted to search for all of our GIFs containing dogs, we simply search for dog, hit enter, and we'll find all of our GIFs that have a dog in them. Or even that new caption that we just added, the beep beep. If we were to search for that, we'll also see it displayed in our search results. So that's kind of the app that I'm hoping to translate from. Currently, this app is built entirely in React, but since Next.js is a React-based framework, what I want to do is basically transfer and convert our React app to a Next.js application. And so with that said, let's dive right into it and see how far we can get. I think we only have about an hour to do this, right? I'll take that as a yes. So I'll open up Visual Studio Code here and let me zoom in so that you guys can see. Can I get a thumbs up if the screen is big enough? Cool. So to get started with, and let me just clear this console here. So to get started with building a Next.js app, all you really need as a prerequisite is npm and a recent version of Node installed. So let me just confirm that I have a recent version of Node running. So I'll run node-v, and I have version 12. I believe with Next.js, as long as you're running Node version 10 plus, you should be fine. So I'll clear my console here, and to create a new Next app, we're simply going to execute npm init next app, and then we're going to give our app a name. And in this case, I'm just going to give my app the name of battle for GIF battle. It entered there, and now npm is going to install our dependencies, and here we have an option for different templates. So I'll just do the default starter app and not the example from Next.js. So we'll just do the default starter. And this is going to download all of our dependencies, download the Next framework, and get the application set up for us. So this is just going to take a couple of seconds. And while this runs, I think since in the previous, in the app that I did for MongoDB Live, I used Tailwind CSS as kind of the CSS framework. So while we're waiting for this to install, let's just go and take a look at Tailwind really quick. So we'll do tailwindcss.com. And I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see. If you're not familiar with Tailwind CSS, it is a CSS-based framework for really building great-looking applications with minimal effort, and it's really, really easy, really, really powerful. And for the longest time in my career, I've always been kind of a bootstrap person or somebody that wrote their own CSS. But with Tailwind, it gives you so many powerful utility classes where you can, this example we're seeing here on their homepage, you simply just give it class names and your application really comes to life. So I think we're going to use Tailwind CSS here as well. And we'll just use the simple installation for it, which we can go by hitting the installation tab, and I'll scroll all the way to the bottom here and just get the direct CDN URL. Tailwind CSS has a lot of different options. We can build it directly into our Next application so that we could do all sorts of cool stuff like tree shaking and getting rid of all of the unused classes. We can customize our Tailwind CSS configuration with different defaults, different breakpoints, or basically whatever we want. But I think for ease of use, we're just going to use the framework as it comes directly from the folks over at Tailwind CSS. And to do that, I am just going to copy their URL from the unpackage CDN. So now if we go back into our code, I see that npm install has successfully created our next application. So I'm going to cd into that battle directory, clear this so we can see it a little better. And then we will run, I believe it's npm start, or no, npm run dev. npm run dev. This is going to start our development server so that we can start building our Next.js application. So let's do this and see if our application has started successfully. And I believe it will because we haven't made any changes to it yet, so I haven't had a chance to break it. But let's go our browser to localhost 3000. Excellent. So we get this welcome page telling us, welcome to Next.js, get started by editing pages/index.js. So this is where we're going to add our code, our application code, to kind of override this default welcome by the folks over at Next.js. So our application is running. We're looking good there. Let's open up our folder here. We'll go into development, GitHub, battle. And terminal. I think that might have killed my app. Let's see, it did. So let's restart it, run dev. And if we go into our pages and into that index.js file, here we'll see that the content of that welcome page. And let me know if the text is big enough or if you want me to zoom in a little more. I'll clear these guys out of the way, and I think I can hide the terminal for now. That way we have more space to work with. So here we can see, create next app, that welcome message, get started by editing, all of the content that we see on localhost 3000. And if we were to go in here and delete everything, so we'll go up from style. Actually, I'll just do this. Main. We'll delete the footer. We'll delete these styles. That way we can just have a clear starting point. And then main. Then here we'll just change the title of our app to gift battle. Now if we go back into our application, we don't see any more content, and we see that we've updated the title to gift battle. And then let's just go in here and paste in that link, which is going to give us our Tailwind CSS installation. So let me add it here, close it, and we should be good to go now. So adding this link, this reference to a style sheet, is going to bring in the default version of Tailwind CSS that we can use. And Next.js has also, so this index.js file, you can think of it as kind of the main entry component to your application. Sweet. I was just looking at the comments just to see if anybody has had any questions yet. If you guys do have any questions, if I'm going too fast or too slow, or if you have any feedback, please let me know, and I'll kind of try to look at the comments every couple minutes just to make sure I'm answering all the questions. But so essentially, this pages directory, so Next.js is a pretty opinionated framework, and for good reason. Having opinions on how we structure our application makes it easier for us to get to writing code, rather than trying to figure out, should I put my components in this way or that way or another way. So in this way, the way that Next.js wants us to style our application, or basically define the routing for our application, is within this special pages directory, we create one new file for every page that we want. So we have index here, which is going to be our home page. And since in our application, we have we have a home page, and then we have an individual page for the details of a GIF. Let's also create another page. So here I will create a new file, and I'll call it gif.js. And for this gif.js, we'll just create a new component. I'll just copy everything over from the home page and rename it. Instead of home, we'll say GIF. And let's add a little bit of content here. We'll say hello from the GIF page. Save that, and then on the index, say hello from the home page. Now if we go back into our application, on the home page, we get the message hello from the home page. And then on the GIF page, we get a different message saying hello from the GIF page. And the reason for this is because we've created those two different files, and also in a traditional React application, you would have to set up the routing yourself. But with Next.js, we get routing out of the box, so all we have to do is create that file, and Next.js is going to figure out how to create the routes for us automatically, so we don't have to deal with it. So now let's go into our application and actually start building it out a little bit. I think, what should we do next? I guess we can, before we get into building more of the UI, I also want to talk about this special API directory that Next.js provides. So Next.js is a full stack framework, so it can handle both our UI, both our front end elements and our back end elements. And in the default example here, we have this API directory as well as this hello.js file created. And with this, if you're familiar with Node.js or the Express framework, here we're essentially just creating a route called hello, and we are responding with a message, basically sending a JSON response with the content having one field called name and the message John Doe. And this is a backend API point that wouldn't be visible to the front end. So if we were to go into our application, go into our localhost API and then hello, we're going to get a backend response. And in this case, we're just sending a static message saying hello, John Doe. So we can build our entire application, both the front end and back end, with Next.js, and we are going to do that in this case. So I think what we should do first is create our backend so that we can interact with it. And to do this, I'm going to create a couple of different functions, a couple of different API endpoints to interact with our MongoDB Atlas cluster. So let's go ahead and create a new API endpoint here and say get all, well, let's just call it get gifs.js. And I'll just copy and paste the code here, and we can delete the comment. That's okay. If we go back into our application, let's just make sure that this does work. GIFs, no. Oh, there we go. Okay, so get GIFs. We had to capitalize the G, but that gave us the correct response. Now, how are we going to get access to our MongoDB data? Well, first of all, let's figure out where our data lives. So if we go into if you go to mongodb.com /atlas or /cloud/atlas, this is the MongoDB database as a service platform. So if you are working with MongoDB and you don't want to manage the database yourself, you just want to quickly access it and start working with your data and not have to worry about any of the maintenance aspects of it, MongoDB Atlas is our solution for that. So it's a fully managed cloud database as a service platform, and I already have a cluster set up here. It's a three node replica set, so we have 3 different nodes running for high availability, And if I click into the collections, it's going to show the contents of my database. So here we have a database called GIF Battle and a collection called GIFs, which is, if you're coming from the SQL world or if you're new to NoSQL, collections are essentially, similar to tables in a traditional SQL database. So here we have a GIFs collection that has about 34 documents. And each of the documents within it, basically, in traditional SQL world, that would be rows. We have a document that contains a number of different fields. So we have an ID, a Giphy URL, tags for whatever the GIF is, and also any captions. And captions contain votes and the text of the caption. So with NoSQL databases and MongoDB, your data you can represent as basically as any valid JSON. In the database, it's stored as BSIN, which is a binary JSON, which is much, much faster. But we could represent it in our UI as JSON. So any valid JSON, such as having arrays, objects, basically any way you want to represent the data, you can. And we can very easily query this data on its subdocuments, on very complex data structures. So to connect to our collection, what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our clusters here. And I do want to point out that if you did want to play around with MongoDB Atlas, you can do so for free forever by creating a free sandbox cluster, which is going to give you access to a 3-node replica set, high availability on any cloud you want. So it can be AWS, Google Cloud, Azure. And from there, you can also, you can scale it up and down if you decide that you do want to use MongoDB Atlas for your real-world applications. And I do have a coupon code AUDO, ADO200, which will give you $200 worth of credits if you do decide that you want to upgrade and use MongoDB Atlas. But to connect to our cluster, I'm just going to hit this connect button and connect to my application, and it's going to give me a URL. So I'm just going to copy this URL. I guess I could hit this copy button, and that's all I need from MongoDB Atlas to know how to connect to it. I've already selected Node.js as my driver, so we're good there. And now let's go into our application here, and I'll create a new folder, call it, not here. We can call it, whatever we want. Let's say utilities, util. And in here, I'll create a file called database, so db.js. And this is where I'm going to set up our connection to MongoDB. And the way that this is going to look is, let me take a look at my notes here. So the way that this is going to look is we're going to import MongoDB, or the Mongo client, so that we can interact with it from our Node.js application. And we'll import this from a package called MongoDB. And we're going to have to import this package or install it into our application. So let me also do that. MongoDB -- save. And while that's installing, we can write the rest of our code. So we'll say our URI, our connection string, is going to be that string that I just copied from MongoDB Atlas. And the only thing I'll have to change here is give the password to my cluster, and in this case, it's just MongoDB. And then the database that I want to connect to, in this case, it's going to be called GIF Battle. We have our URI, and then we'll create a new variable called cache database, which is going to hold a reference to the database once we are connected to it, so that we don't have to continually do it. And then we'll export a function that we can interact with from our API endpoint called, and we'll call it connect to database. And from here, we'll say if we're already connected. So if that CacheDB variable is not null, so if it exists, then we're just going to send that back, which is going to be our database. cached DB. Otherwise, we're going to connect to our client. So we'll say client await Mongo client dot connect, pass in our URI, and set this new URL parser to true. And from here, we're just going to connect to a specific database as well. So once we are connected, we'll say await client DB and pass in the name of our database, which is gift battle. And then if this is the first time we're doing this, we're going to set that cached DB, not cached DB, as our database. And then we're just going to return our database. So far, so good. So this is all we need to connect to our MongoDB database within our Next.js application. So now if we go into our getgifts.js API endpoint, we can very easily just import that connected database method. So we'll say import connect to database from, and then we're going to have to go up to directories into our utilities, util db. And now from here, we can connect to our database. So we'll say let database equal, and we'll await our connection. And then from here, once we have this database, we can do whatever we need to do. So in our case, we're going to want to get all of the gifts from our collection, from our database, and display them in the user interface. So let's say database.collection, and we'll give the name of our collection. So we can go back into here, and let me just see if there's any comments. If I could zoom in a little bit, yes, I can. So we're going to have to figure out what our collection is called. Let's just confirm the name here. It's gifts. So we'll go back into our code, say gifts. And then from here, we have our database.collection gifts, and then we can run a find operation. And what find is going to do is it's going to find all of the items in our collection. So here we go. Just make sure that that is right. Or we can actually, we'll use ES6 here as well. So we'll say let our data, let our gifts. Let's say let gifts equal await database collection gifts find. And then I believe the command is to array, it might be as array. And then just to confirm that all of this works, once we have our gifts, let's just send them as our JSON response. So we have our database. So let database connect to our database, and then we're going to go into the gifts collection and get all of the data there, and then send it back to our front end. So let's make sure that this works. Fingers crossed. We'll refresh. Okay, so crashed. And so what we want here is to make this an async function. Gifts. Actually, we can do it. What am I trying to do? Do that. Okay, so we are using ES6 async await, so that's why we needed to do that. So we just had to add async there. And then we also get another error, bad auth authentication failed. So, oh, that's because we had the wrong password. We still had an extra dash there. So let's fix that and see if we are good to go now. So now, if we go back into our API, into our front end, and I'll zoom in a little bit, refresh our page, we get back an array of all of the GIFs in our database as a nice long JSON object. So now we have our data from MongoDB. Looks great. So now let's go ahead and actually use this data in our application and display it in the UI, so that when a user goes to the home page, instead of seeing this hello from the homepage message, they see our GIFs, the top caption, and all of that good stuff. And let me see if there's any questions, any comments. Nope, everything looks good. So we can continue. So we'll go back into our code editor and we'll go into our home page. And the first thing we'll want to do is get our data. So we want to get that data from the API endpoint, from our Next.js API endpoint. We want to get it from the backend to our home component, to our index component. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to use a function that Next.js exposes called getStaticProps. And this function is very, very powerful because this is going to run on the server side the first time that we load the page. So our component is not going to render until we get this data. And this is important for SEO purposes. So if you're building an application and you care about SEO, using the getStaticProps to get the data prior to rendering the component is going to make it much, much easier for you to kind of build a traditional web application while still leveraging the full power of React.js. So to see how this works, we're going to export a new function, and it's going to be an async function, and we'll call it getStaticProps. And with this function, what we're going to do is we're going to make a fetch request to our endpoint, to our getGifs endpoint, and get that data. So we're going to say get our response. And we're going to await, since this is an async await function, we're going to call fetch, and we're going to call localhost 3000 API getGifs. And then from here, we're going to get our JSON data. So we'll just call it JSON, and we'll await for the JSON data to come back. And then from here, what we're going to return is an object, which is going to be our props. So if you're familiar with React and how props get passed between components, we're just going to pass in some props to our homepage component. And the props are going to be data.json. Data, and it's going to be that JSON data that we have. And then the one thing that we'll need to do is import our fetch library as well, because we haven't done that yet. So let me open up a new terminal window here and import the isomorphic unfetch library. So we'll do npm install isomorphic unfetch. And let's just save. And what this isomorphic unfetch library is going to do is it's going to allow us to call fetch requests on both the front end and the back end. And I think the folks at Next.js in a recent version made this even better, but we're just going to do it this way for now. So now that we have our fetch library working, we have our data, all we need to do is pass in as a prop our data. And that's going to be our GIFs. So we have our data here, and that's going to represent our GIFs. Before we go any further, let's just console log this data and make sure that it is working. and that we are getting it successfully before we start building out the UI. So we'll go back in here, refresh, and our home page shouldn't look different, but in the console, we do get an array. So that console log data does give us all of the GIFs with all of the tags and captions and everything that we would expect. So far, so good. We are making really good progress, really happy. So now let's go into our UI or into our index component and update the UI to make it, to build it out so that the user can actually see the user interface that we want to build. So to do this, I'm going to, I'm just going to copy and paste the UI for the GIFs. So let's actually do it this way. The first thing we're going to need to do is import useState and useEffect from React. That way, we're going to be using the new React hooks for managing our data. So we can use this useState and useEffect. And then in here, we're going to create our set of GIFs. So we'll say let GIFs and set GIFs. We're going to use the state, but I actually don't think we even need to do this specifically. Our default data can be the data that's passed in. Right, so then we could just do console log GIFs. I believe this will work all the same. So we are good here. So our default data is just going to be that data we pass in as props. We may be setting GIFs later. We'll just keep it in here for now. And now that we have our GIFs, we can build out the user interface. So I'm just going to paste some styles over. That way we save a little bit of time. So in here, I'll paste it in and talk through it. So I've pasted a little bit of data here, which is just a couple of divs with a bunch of next or a bunch of Tailwind class components, classes. So we have our container. We want our container to be in the middle of the page, and we want our text to be centered as well. And we're going to use Flex. So we're gonna use Flexbox for our UI elements, and then we have our GIFs data that we're just going to map over and then generate a link to the GIF page, as well as our GIF component. And then our GIF component here, I think I can actually just copy and paste UI as well. So the UI here is just going to display 2 GIFs at a time, I believe. Let's save this and see what it looks like. Okay, so if we refresh our page, we see our GIFs have loaded. They're all very, very huge. So something in our styling is messed up. Let's see if we can debug this. With full... What didn't we do? Well, why don't we do this? Half. Third. There we go. I think that works. That works for now. We could update it later as needed. But so now we have connected to MongoDB. We have created an API, a backend API endpoint within our Next.js application, gotten the data from MongoDB, and then displayed it in this UI on the front end for developers. And we do have a link here, but I don't think, do we? We do not. So let's add the link that I had. wrap it around the component so that a user can click on a link and be taken to the details page. So if we do this, we're going to get an error, but that's because link is not defined, and the reason it's not defined is because we didn't include it yet. So let's go into our code here and bring it in. And I think we can do import link from, I believe it's next link. Cannot read property index of undefined. So let's try to debug a little bit. And I think what we can actually do is let's take a look at the Next.js docs and see what we did wrong with our linking. So routing, we have our routes. So next link href. So that's, we're using the React router way of linking. And I think that might be a reason why it failed. So let's try href and see if that fixes our issue. So we'll go back into the application. Okay, cool. So it does work now. But when we click on any of the GIFs, we are taken to GIF and then the ID of the GIF. And this isn't, this doesn't work because if you recall, our second route that we created is called GIF. Is just called GIF. And here we're passing in a dynamic route. So we're going to have to fix this as well. And to do that, we can also look at our docs and see how we can add dynamic routing. So we have our dynamic routes here. And to do this, we basically just create a page. We're going to create a subfolder. So instead of a GIF component, we're going to create a GIF folder. And then in that folder, we're going to use these special brackets to indicate that this is going to be a dynamic parameter that we're going to pass into our application. So let's fix that next. We'll go in here and we'll create in our pages, we'll create a new folder called GIF, and then say id.js. And then in here, we can just copy this GIF information, our id.js file. What am I doing wrong? So we'll say GIF id.js. Okay, there we go. Now let's just make sure that this works before moving forward. So we'll go back into our application, click on one of the GIFs, and now we are taken to hello from the GIF page, and our routing works correctly. Now let me just see if there's any other comments, any questions. Nope, so far so good. Excellent. So for our next step, what we're going to do is implement another API endpoint to get just a single GIF. So we have get GIFs here. Let's create an endpoint to get GIF.js. And we can copy this information over. And now, instead of running a find one operation, or instead of running a find operation to get all of our GIFs, we just want to find one specific GIF. So we'll say find one, and it's no longer going to be an array, so we can remove this to array. And then how are we going to find the GIF that we are working with? Well, within this find one method, and even within the find, we can pass in an object that's going to tell us how to filter the data that we want to get back. So in this case, let's just say we wanted to get one static ID. So here in this case, I'm just going to copy the ID of this particular GIF. The way that we can get just this one particular GIF from our application is, let me check here. We have find one. So what we're going to do is query off of that ID field and pass in the object ID that GIF. So doing this is going to get us back just the one GIF. So all the information on the one GIF that we want to work with. So if we go into our application, into the API route and get GIF, we are going to get back, oh, we have an internal server error. So something crashed. Let's see what we did wrong. GIFs, find one. Unknown operator. Let's see if this will work. I don't think this will work. So the reason that we need to do this OID is because we want the object ID. So our IDs in MongoDB are stored as object IDs, not as just clear strings. So let's try to debug what's going on here. An operator. So we can also try to import JSON from. I think there's a BSON module, right? Let's take a look. Or is it object ID? Oh, there we go. So what we can do actually is so we want the object ID. We'll transform this string to an object ID and then pass it into our find one. So now this should work. Back into our code, refresh, and we do. So for that ID, for that particular ID, we got back just one document that has the GIF itself, as well as the number of votes and the different captions. So far, so good. Let's go back into our implementation here, and we're going to dynamically pass that information to our client. So what we can do is we can delete this GIF now since we're no longer using it. And we'll go into our index. We can copy this async function because it's going to look pretty similar. So we'll copy that. And then we can also pass in a context here. And this context is going to allow us to get the query parameters of our GIFs as well. So we can let's console log the context to see what exactly we get. And then we're going to pass that info to get the GIF. So let's see how this works. We'll say, go to a specific page, get static path. Oh, okay. So instead of get static path, we're going to call it get static paths. And the reason for that is because we do have dynamic routes. So to fetch that data, get static paths. Let's see how this works. So we want get static paths. So extra keys returned, expected, path, fallback. Okay, so I haven't used get static paths. This was a new feature. So what we're gonna do, let's see if they have an example. Post. So so we can call okay, get static props. This is a tricky one. Okay, so what if we did this? So we say get static props params. Yes, and console log params, and then in the get static paths, Okay, so this one is a little tricky. Probably should have done a little more research on it. So let's just see what if any error this gives us. All the errors. Okay, so another way we can do this actually is we're not going to do server-side rendering on the ID. So we'll just do the traditional React style data fetching. So we can actually do that very easily as well. So what we'll do is we'll import useState and React from our head. And we'll also import that isomorphic. Actually, I guess we don't even need the fetch anymore because it's included. So what we can do is we'll say this. So we'll say let set gif equal useState, and it's going to be an empty object by default. And then we are going to use effect. So we'll say use effect, and we only want this to run once. So when our component loads, we are going to essentially do this. So const response await fetch, and then const JSON equals JSON. To log our response here. And let me make sure that this works before we go any further. There should be objects are not valid as React children. Okay, so let's diagnose a little more. Fact. Okay, does anybody in the comments? So Calvin, yes, Next.js does support TypeScript. And they have types for all of the different variables or all of the different components of the Next framework. But as we try to further diagnose this issue, this is the fun part of live coding, right? Let's see, what am I doing wrong? What if we just do a regular fetch? Let's see if this works. Okay, so I feel like I am messing something up somewhere else. Right. So maybe that wasn't my issue at all in the first place, but let's see. Oh man, we were going so well. So where did we go wrong? That's good. And then when we try to navigate away, we get a fail. Any reason to fail? So objects are not valid as React child. Okay, well, we can try to debug it a little more. Let's see if we can get to the bottom of this guy. Oh, but that might be the issue. Let's do this and make this async. All right, here we go. We're making progress. We got our response. So then we have our data. So we'll say data JSON and GIF, and then we'll set GIF. And this get should be a GIF. Set GIF as the GIF, and then let's just render that GIF on the page. Okay, so we're making progress slowly. Object with keys. So let's render GIF.url. Okay, perfect. So we are back on track. And we have our GIF here. So instead of getting data using server-side rendering, which you can do with Next.js, I just need to brush up on how to do it in 9.4. And I'll be happy to do that and make a correction to the GitHub repo later. But here we're just using the get GIF and set GIF React hooks, so doing it the traditional React way. And the other thing we can do here is capture the URL parameters. So right now our get GIF is static, right? So it is a hard-coded value. But we want to make that dynamic because people can click on different GIFs. And to do this, we can also go into the Tailwind docs and figure out how to get the data. And I believe, yeah, it's super simple. So we simply just need to import the use router from next router, and then in our code, get that value. So up here, and I guess even in the use effect, we can get that data, and instead of PID, what we're going to want to get is the ID because that's what we called it. And then we can also pass this as a query parameter to our get GIF. So we'll say ID equals ID equals. I don't want to do the whole string interpolation, but so let's make sure that this works. Go back into our code. Hooks can only be called inside of the body of a function. Should I do this outside? And let's also check our network call to make sure that it was the correct one, that we're passing the ID. So we'll do XHR only. So ID is undefined. And maybe it's because we don't have it yet, right? That is correct. So we should be able to do this. Right? Or is it giving me an error? Get GIF is undefined again. Okay. So let's figure out why that is. Router.query. Because we don't get it. We don't have the ID because the component isn't rendered yet. Is that the reason? I think that could be the reason. So let's see, how do we get around this issue? Tricky one. But no worries, we can figure it out. So API get GIF ID. Query. Well, we could take a look at the docs. Our good old docs. shallow routing. So let's see if we could figure this out. Else prop can be generated dynamically. So is that what we should do? Let's see. And if we go back into our home component, in our link, we have an href. Delete this, and let's see if we get the right data now. Network undefined. Okay. So it actually looks like we are coming up on the hour. I totally lost track of time, but let me do a little bit more research on how to actually and properly do this. At least we made some pretty good progress. We were able to connect to MongoDB, get our data for our homepage, and kind of get everything up and running. So we're in a pretty good position. I think I would be happy, Amir, if you'll have me, I would be happy to join next time and kind of finish up this app.
Sure, yeah, we
with
can do
the
that.
correct way.
Yeah, we could do a part 2 on this. No problem.
Yeah, happy to.
Okay, let's do that. Thanks a lot for the webinar. I think it's very cool to see what kind of things you can do with Next.js. I had one small question. So you mentioned that it has similarities, or at least you can use kind of React things inside of Next.js. So what would be the kind of main reason you would use Next.js over React, or why would you do that?
Sure. Yeah. So the reason you would use Next.js over React is really if you wanted an entire framework. So React is a really good library for building front-end applications. Next.js is kind of built on top of React to give you more functionality out of the box. So things like routing, static side, server-side rendering, all of these kind of features, automatic code splitting, API routes, basically things that React doesn't give you out of the box. Mm-hmm. Next.js will, and makes it much more easier for you to get started and kind of start building the application rather than figuring out, do I use React Route or do I use a different routing library and stuff like that.
Okay, nice. So let's do a part 2. I think it would be interesting to do that.
Sure.
And for the people that are watching on Twitch and on YouTube, just subscribe so you'll get the notification when we go live the next time. We'll plan it in. Probably it will be relatively short term, but we can have a look, and we'll of course put it on our social media. So you can follow Ado on Twitter. So he has at @CookieAdo. So you can have a look there. And of course, the coupon code that you mentioned is Ado200. I think it is for MongoDB Atlas. So if someone wants to use that, go ahead. And I think that we'll wrap it up here and then move on to the part 2. So the next time we'll finish the app in this case.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I think part 2 will give us a little more time to actually implement it the right way, because I do want to show you guys the right way and the best way to do it. We just kind of ran out of time today, but thank you so much for joining. Thank you for having me on, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.